Hi, I'm Jeff Johnston, host of the Living Undeterred podcast. This is a reminder that we're going on tour next summer. Yes, that's right, we're going on tour. The Living Undeterred US Tour 2022. We're leaving on May 9th next summer. We're going to every state and we're raising $1 million. That's the plan to change the narrative on mental health, substance abuse, and addiction. We need your help, though. I cannot do this alone. I know there's a lot of people out there interested in this project of ours. You can go to our website, www.livingundeterred.com. We need volunteers. We need state partnerships. We need sponsors. We need as many people as we can to get out there and help those people that need help to change the narrative on mental health, substance abuse, and addiction. Again, go to livingundeterred.com and click on the Living Undeterred icon, and all the information is there. Again, thank you very much for the support, and as always, keep living undeterred. Hello, welcome to the Living Undeterred podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Johnston, and today I have an exciting guest, Jake LeClair from the wonderful state of New York, the Lake Placid area. And we're going to have an awesome conversation today. I met Jake on social media through some mutual friends and was immediately drawn to his passion towards advocacy, towards recovery with addictions and substance abuse, and his own personal story. His vulnerability drew me in. And him and I have a lot of similarities. And our stories, though, are pretty unique to us, but can certainly help other people that are having challenges with these issues with mental health, substance abuse, and addiction. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Jake LeClair. I'm going to let Jake introduce himself. But Jake, honored to have you on the show. And why do you think I brought you on the Living Undeterred podcast?
Hey, Jeff. It's so great to be here. Thanks for having me. And I love the question. Well, sure. We have a lot of common ground in terms of the negative impact that the areas of substance abuse, addiction, suicide, and other crises with mental health have had in our life. For me, I think I have 41 years of experience with this because I pretty much think I was brought into the world that way. And for me, also so important, Jeff, is I think we share a ton of innovation and passion to pioneer a different way forward, and that's one reason I feel really connected to you on this. And then, when we talked a couple of weeks ago, what I thought was really cool was when we talked about the really tremendous positive impact that college athletics have had in my life and in the lives of the people you love. And actually over here is a picture of me when I was a senior back at Cornell on the polo string. And I got to tell you, man, like if there's one thing that gave me a ton of agility to operate in life, no matter how much life gets burnt down, it was playing college athletics for me.
Yeah.
And today it's such an honor to be in my purpose and share some of that agility gift I was given with people who could benefit from it.
I do like that angle of the sports because in my book, this one's for you, An Inspirational Youth Through Addiction, Death, and Meaning, I think I have 5 or 6 chapters dedicated to the game of golf, which in my story, people think, well, geez, Jeff, you went out and became a pro golfer. No, furthest thing from that. I embraced my son's dream to play college golf at a very young age, even before our son died of heroin. And when that did happen, though, we had an outlet. Sports provided a platform for Ian, my middle son, to raise over $25,000 to help mental health, addiction, alcohol abuse, suicide, all those things. Matter of fact, there's our sign, the 2021 Living Undeterred Golf Classic. And we continue to use golf as a way to continue our story. And I get often asked, and Jake, I'm sure you'd say the same thing, about where does your fight come from? You use the word resilient. I use undeterred, but they're the same thing. And where does it come from? And I have to say that for me, it came from my early indoctrination to competitive youth sports. And you get knocked down, you get back up. My dad was a tremendous athlete, could have played. He got drafted to play for the Cubs, and he was an All-American basketball player too. And I learned a lot from sports. With 3 brothers, if you weren't competitive, you didn't eat.
Mm.
And I think as you got older in life, and then life throws a curveball like death or getting fired or a drunk driving that I had or anything that happens, you revert back to those competitive juices. So I agree with you. Yours was, you said polo in your case?
Yeah, over here is the horse that's made the biggest difference in my life, including he played a little polo, and over here is the outcome of that. So I in no way come from a privileged background. I come from the school of the hard knocks, and somehow my mom did a miracle job of getting the bills paid, and for some reason I showed up in the world hungry for better, hungry for more. And so the part of my story where I'm from a town of 1,000 people, and I was just hungry to do better, is so key to how I got here. And what does that boil down to? Yeah, I've put myself through a lot of hard work over the years, and I've been through plenty of years where my life was totally a mess. I would say, for the most part, Jeff, in those years, to answer your question, there's always been at least this little element of hope. The flame burnt at least a little bit at all times, that something better was available to me and I was on the way to the solution.
It makes me think about, you said the word better, I think 2 or 3 times in that comment, but when I talk about the better versus the bitter road, and I make presentations on this and I do lots of writing on this, is that, we have choices every day, Jake, and there could be a choice of whether you are going to drink today or not going to drink, or you're going to break into someone's house like my son did before he passed away, or you're not going to break into someone's house, or you're going to study for a test, or you're not going to study for a test. And you're so correct in that, in that the choices that we make, choices always precede consequences, right? They're always come before the consequence.
And consequences can be positive or negative.
Right,
The word could have a connotation that they're only negative depending on how you were raised or what you learned when you're growing up. But man, I mean, the last 5 years, what showed up is positive consequences get pretty darn exciting when life gets big. And that's how it's going so far.
So let's go back to the younger Jake. You talked earlier off the show when we were chatting about your why. How did you find your why? And was it something that was an event, or was it a process?
Oh, wow. Definitely a process. Today, I can especially see how all these dots that for a long time didn't make sense. In fact, at times I was really dissatisfied with my life, how actually all these experiences have led me to my why. Ultimately, though, Jeff, for me, it found me. Would I necessarily, like, if I just think about this cognitively, would I necessarily choose to be in my why if it was a matter of choice? And I gotta say, it's almost a no.
Right.
Except it found me, and the way that it just clicks, I can't deny it.
Interesting. I often think too about how I was presented this opportunity through what happened in my life to decide whether I want to embrace this opportunity. And although I say life is 2 roads, if your 2 roads are happiness and misery, there is really only one road, because you don't want to be on the misery road. That's not even an option.
Which choice do you want to make?
Yeah, in a way, the choice is already made. You have to go on the better road. You can't be on the bitter road. There's no good ending on the bitter road. It leads to anxiety, depression, substance abuse. This is Suicide Awareness or Prevention Week. And when this posts, probably in October, that'll be over. But Suicide Prevention Week should be every day. It shouldn't. Yeah. We shouldn't just have weeks set aside for these things. But it's a good first step. Your whole life should be dedicated to suicide prevention. But so let me go back to, again, we talked a little bit about some of the things you've been through, and now you are in a recovery business. I think you like to term it, or recovery advocacy. What specifically do you do? I mean, what's your elevator pitch to somebody to explain what Jake LeClair does?
I love it. I'm a recovery navigator. And the idea of navigation in the addiction recovery field is just starting to catch on. But there is already evidence that shows that when warm handoffs happen through navigation, the long-term outcomes are 26% better than the system we have. And part of my story is I've always had this little obsession with seamless integration, this idea of connecting the dots better. And Jeff, part of me is also this innovator, this pioneer, where I think I see what works in existing systems, and fundamentally, I am so hungry about transformational innovation on whatever that system is, and especially when it comes to processes. So I'm kind of geeking out now to fess up that I'm pretty obsessed about innovating processes. But man, when we get better processes going, we get people to better results. And so specifically what I'm focused on in the practice I'm developing, the practice I've become comfortable calling a business, is supporting mothers who love a son or a daughter struggling with their relationship with alcohol and drugs. Because what we know is when we access the family in recovery navigation, we can uncover exactly what's holding people back in the whole family system, which often when we see these young men or women who've been to rehab 5-10 times, it's exactly the time to look at the whole family. I mean, my view is we should look at it a long time ago, before 5 or 10 rehabs, but especially at 5 or 10 rehabs. And ultimately, let's get these families all on the route to happiness. Because like we were talking earlier, Jeff, like we're pretty much pack animals. If you don't feel called to be around a pack, I'd love to have a conversation about that. But like down in our genes, somewhere in our bones, is this hunger to be in the pack. And for many of us, at least, our family of origin or a chosen family is the pack.
Is a warm handoff the same as outreach?
I like that. Well, they're different words, so they must be different things. I think of the warm handoff, Jeff, as something that's very planned. I think of the warm handoff as ideally professionally managed. And that's really interesting to me. There is so much great non-professional recovery. And one of the things I see, though, is some folks don't get the kind of results, the kind of goals and success that they're looking for because they become overly dependent on non-professional recovery. And what I see with navigation is if you drop that navigator in, well, then there can be a bunch of non-professional recovery around that professional navigator that gets great results because at least there's a professional involved. And the gap when folks lack any professional support, well, it is kind of leaving your experience up to other non-professionals' experience when it comes to the outcomes.
You know, you look at the numbers and everything's worse. And if we could say, well, we'll just keep adding more things to the system to get the numbers better. So anxiety, depression, suicide would all start dropping. It isn't working. So we need to change the narrative. I guess in regards to alternative ways to look at this, what are some things that come top of mind to you, alternative ways to work on improving mental health, substance abuse, and addiction?
Well, this may be provocative. To me, the universe is always conspiring for my best interests and anyone else's best interests. And what I mean by that is stepping back and looking for what is it in this really difficult time that is actually the universe conspiring for the best interests, because it truly doesn't conspire for worse interests. And what I believe is that societally, we are going through a period of massive awakening. The invitation is there. The knock is happening. The red phone on your bedstand that rings at 2 a.m. is ringing. And it's been ringing. And at least in my family history, speak to that for a minute, Jeff. I mean, if I look back, most of the men have historically not lived past their early 50s, dying of heart attacks. Most of the men have significant issues with alcohol, chain smoking. A lot of the women present what we call codependency. One of the things I'm really obsessed about. Okay. History of legacy of low income earning people who served in the wars, who most definitely took on trauma in those wars. We know the trauma is intergenerational. And then in the past couple of years, toxic stress has finally come to the surface as California a few years ago got their first Surgeon General for the state, whereas we're used to having one for the country. She brought to light this idea of toxic stress. And, you know, I just sit back and look, Jeff, and it's an inconvenient truth, but how many more generations are we going to keep doing what we've been doing, passing on these traumas, being confused that our future generations are struggling with them?
Yeah, it seems like to me that the cycle just repeats itself. And, you know, I was speaking to a group of parents the other day about trying to change this narrative. You know, changing the narrative means trying something different. And I said, you know, how many people out here have kids? And I think there was like 40 parent groups, and almost everyone raised their hand. And I said, would y'all agree that you'd like to have your kids not start drinking? Would that be a good, fair answer? Yeah. And I said, how many here in this room drink alcohol? Not one hand went up. And my point was, this isn't about your kids. This is about you. You want to make a difference? You show your kids how to make a difference. Don't tell them not to drink. Stop drinking alcohol.
Demonstrate.
And my point is that when I mentioned the kids, they all said, oh, yeah, sure. But they're not willing to take the sacrifice to make the changes in their own life. You don't want your kids to smoke? Quit smoking. You don't want your kids to be overweight? Then don't order pizza every night. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much more clear it can be for me. And I'm not a clinician. I don't have any medical background. I just go on observation. And I'm not saying quitting alcohol was easy. I haven't drank in almost 4 years. I've never smoked. I've never done drugs. But there's plenty of things that I've had to make decisions on every day. But I think it's so easy for us to go back and point to the kids and say, well, we need to change their behavior. We need to change the demand. We need to do all that. Yeah, we do. But it really starts with us. I mean, there's a reason why on a plane they say put the mask on yourself first. We need to take care of ourselves first before we can start taking care of other people. So, you know, I just didn't know what you thought about that statement, because I say that frequently.
It is a pandemic of codependency out there, quite frankly.
Oh, no question.
Jeff. And it's the term codependency is not popular. Some people are going to grab it from this interview today and say, that's a really good term. Some people are going to be offended by the use of the term on this interview. Right. But we are in a pandemic of codependency, and that is my position. And it's also my position that codependency is this thing people learn in childhood, and it carries deeply and subtly on throughout their life. It exists in almost any relationship, at least a little bit. And I was actually just explaining this to some nice folks an hour ago. It's as simple as this. It's this thing we do where we don't understand where I stop and you start. And people who are healthier on this spectrum are clear about where Jake's hula hoop is and where Jeff's hula hoop is. And people who are less healthy, well, they end up on top of each other with their hula hoops. And for the child, the effects are very damaging and traumatizing, and it's a lifetime of work to deal with that. Some folks, myself included, would tell you it becomes addictive. And then in my story, when I look at my reason for the use of alcohol and other substances, it was hands down to numb out codependency. But my original vice goes back, in my view, to the codependency and the traumas that related from that.
You know, if you look at codependency, and I have another gentleman on my podcast, one of my early podcasts. His name is David Essel, and he's a motivational speaker, and he's got a great radio show. Actually, I'm going to be a guest on a show, I think, next month. He's got like 15 books out, really good. He says the number one addiction is codependency. Number one human addiction is codependency. And that's where I first heard that from. And you're the second person now to echo that. So obviously that seems to be a theme. But if you think of codependency, if you ask the average person, what is codependency? They think of it as from me to somebody else. I'm dependent on Jake. I'm dependent on my parents. I'm dependent on alcohol. But really, codependency can be the inverse of enabling. So let's say you're enabling somebody, you're providing the codependency. So I think enabling is and again, in a talk I did the other day, I was talking about if you're with an addict or someone in recovery and they like you and they want to be around you all the time, you're probably enabling them. If they hate you and they're mad at you and they confront you a lot, you're probably trying to save their life. And that's the dynamic between codependency and enabling. And so, yeah, I think codependency's for some reason, it's either misunderstood by society. And I don't think it's a one-way street. I think codependency, like I said, the inverse of that would be the enabler, the person who is the enabler. Someone that's always enabling somebody is just as bad as being the one being codependent. I don't know if you thought of it from that perspective.
Well, it's all at a point destructive.
Yeah, good point.
What I care about is simply, can we gain you access to what's going on in order to get you at least a peak of awareness of what's going on? Because the other thing about codependency, which is exactly why people may be like, what are you talking about? Is it's a canary in the coal mine. And the thing is, they don't have a canary. And it's such a colorless, odorless, tasteless gas in their life until we can find a way to get the canary to start chirping. And no different than my relationship with cocaine when I just one day, March 25th, 2017, woke up and it was like my soul had died. I had let go of the old version of me and something was indescribably different. That awareness, I had another bottom after that with my relationship with codependency, which really it has to do with my unhealthy relationships with my family and friends.
What are your coping mechanisms?
What are my coping mechanisms? Lately, I've been doing a lot of breathing. I find it super impactful.
I do too.
It was not part of my early recovery story. I got to tell you though, for me, the hands down the biggest thing in my story was the surrender. When, at least to some extent, because don't get me wrong, like I can get down with some controlling still to this day, but the surrender, the indescribable surrender that occurred as a result of my relationship with narcotics, that's the coping mechanism or the way of coping that continues to pay dividends to me today.
What are you surrendering, or whom are you surrendering to?
My experience especially with the narcotics, was that it allowed me to get into an illusion that I was the center of the whole darn universe. And the obsession with attempting to run that show. And in my very messy, very miserable surrender, I experienced this almost instant flip where I accessed an awareness that just wasn't the case anymore. Now, the problem is, and the huge reason why I'm so called to this is, Jeff, I can't explain how I made it out of that with my life, with my physical flesh life. As I said, I believe my old soul died and a new soul was born. But what it took to go through that without professional supports should have killed me.
I'm the same. I'm you, man. I don't know where either. And that's the thing. I'm on this journey, Jake. And that's why I wanted to talk to you, is that I'd like to sit down and say, well, I found God. Well, that didn't happen. I'm an atheist, so I can't ascribe that to God. Or something else happened. I just, like you, one day I just said, I tried depression. I didn't like it, so I quit. I thought about suicide. I thought that's not for me, so I got that thought out of my head. I assume now that you meditate.
Almost a constant state.
Because you said, everything you've said sounds like somebody who is into meditation.
And let me tell you, I resisted that one too. Here's what happened. I went down to Central America to begin my recovery.
Cool.
I actually asked the owner of the program, so there's going to be other people there. I won't be alone, right? And he honestly explained that usually there are, but it might be that there won't be.
Right.
And in my case, for 3 of the 6 weeks I was there, I was alone. And I just said how I resisted the meditation. But when you're in the jungle in Central America and there's no access to technology, minus 30 minutes a week, and you're the only person in a beautiful environment, well, it helps you to get comfortable with being quiet and alone, breathing, finding the present moment. And so it's another one of the miracles in the story that it just happened to find me.
That's very interesting. It sounds like you and I both have very similar coping mechanisms. And I guess one of the things that I'm trying to do, especially with this tour next summer that we're going to the whole United States and raising $1 million for substance abuse and mental health and addiction, is someone said, well, Jeff, I can't wait till you're out there telling people how. I said, oh, stop, wait a minute. This is a we story. This is not an I story. This is not about Jeff Johnston, motivational coach, or Jeff Johnston, life coach. No, this is more about, Jake, I want to hear how you're surviving. I have a platform. I'd like to share your story in conjunction with my story, that somebody out there that they'll say is religious. They may say, well, since Jeff doesn't believe in God, I'm not going to be interested in anything that comes out of his mouth after that. But Jake is a man of God, so I'll listen to him. So I want to provide everybody out there enough arrows in the quiver that when their son overdoses on heroin or their spouse dies from grief, which what killed my wife 2 months ago.
Sorry for your loss.
21-year marriage. Again, I have these opportunities where I can screw this up, and it's hard to tell people that I'm a better man. It is, because they're like, well, you don't care, or you're callous, or maybe you guys didn't have a good marriage, or maybe you and your son didn't get along. Now, it's so more intertwined spiritually and so deeper than all the superficial human things we put on things. But no. So anyway, this whole journey is about trying to find people, not confirmation bias, Jake. I am the opposite of confirmation bias. I read and watch things that I don't agree with to try to broaden my scope of perspective. So I'm not running through life with the illusion of I. And you said that so beautifully a few minutes ago when you talked about everything being about you. And that's through something I learned through my meditation as well, is how really insignificant we are. Yet we yield a lot of power in how we live our life and affect others. But in the big picture of things, when you and I are gone, man, unless we have expensive stuff, we buried ourselves like the Egyptians did. Ain't nobody raiding my tombs,
Most likely I will not be spoken of a few years after I'm gone.
I won't either.
But I'll tell you, 5 years ago, I wouldn't want to talk about that. It was very important to keep the racket going. I think back now, one of my rackets was using the narcotic. I wasn't going to sell narcotics, because if I gave you narcotics, then I could really keep you controlled. I could really keep you where I needed you. And that's just one example of the rackets I was running and the destruction that resulted. And at least it back to, my experience of the universe is always conspiring for the higher good. Somehow I got out of it, and I have the opportunity to help other people. So if I got a hell with the buckets of water, and there's some other people trying to get out of the flames, well, then I just figure it's my job to go back in there with those buckets and douse them on them. But at the same time, the thing I've gotten from this is an ability to look you in the eye and say, I'm also going to do what's best for me.
Something I'm going to ask you, and I'm not sure what the answer will be, but I'll throw it out there. Your descent into substance abuse and addiction, was that initially more of an escape from something, or were you more interested in exploring something?
I got you. Well, I tell you that as a young man in a hellacious environment that was this family secret, I would have told you I would never drink. And then I would tell you, actually, the effect created by codependency rendered me unable to say no when someone else invited me to drink. Part of my codependency has been lacking a no. That's not the other person's fault. That's my inability to say no. And then flash forward around 2005, Jeff, I remember I was living in New York City, and it was around, it was Cinco de Mayo, but for some reason I was drinking Long Island iced teas on Cinco de Mayo, and those things had an indescribable ease and comfort. They created an effect of peace and calm, not that different than the one I found today, but through the ingestion of them. And I can look in on that, right into that period, and say that's probably where things started to escalate. Now, I did get this gift that I consider to be rare, where in the years that followed that, I had this hunch, this intuition that something was not okay about what was going on. And I did things that we now know aren't that useful to deal with drinking too much. Like, I'll run a marathon, or I'll work harder, or I'll exercise. Well, like, those are not things science has shown so far to actually treat substance use disorder or addiction. And then eventually the window closed. And one of the pivotal events when the window closed was when I found cocaine. And for me, and I know for this person it's gambling, for this person it's alcohol. For me, cocaine was when I had really arrived, when I felt this ease that it's almost a spiritual experience to me to reflect on what it was like to discover cocaine. So we all have that substance or that pattern, that behavior that really brings us home when we're in our addiction. For me, that was it. And off I went. It really closed the door on having a chance to stop, despite all the ways I had tried to look into options before that.
So you talked about supporting mothers who have children that are into drugs and alcohol or substance abuse and addiction. Is that would you say that's where you hang your hat? That's your day-to-day, I don't want to say client base, but the people you work with, is supporting the mothers that have children with these issues?
That's my calling. So first and foremost,
how do you specifically do that for your model, or what do you find successful, and how can you help people watching this show or listening that are the mothers that are dealing with these issues? I look at my wife, and it cost her life. Mm-hmm. It cost her life. And we tried so hard to save our son. And when we couldn't, she couldn't save herself, and I couldn't save her. And I'm not trying to throw my wife under the bus. Don't get me wrong. Some mountains are just too tall for some people. And she did with what she had the best that she could. And that's probably the majority of most people out there that would deal with that type of grief and trauma that way. But what do you find for moms out there? What can you say to help them?
I think I have a priceless piece of information to share today, and it's my honor to give it away.
Absolutely. I'm all ears.
I dig it. Hey, so I am all for programs like Al-Anon. The thing I'm going to share is available in that program. what I find as I go where I go is that Al-Anon just isn't a fit for everybody. For people it's a fit, it's great. And for people who don't feel at home there, it doesn't work out. The program I offer to mothers, the program that Al-Anon offers to mothers, the program that other programs offer to mothers, and they just have to find one that's a good fit for them, is the hands down way to support your child as a mother or your spouse as a husband or wife who's struggling with alcohol or drugs is to simply get in the mirror with yourself and get into action, outgrowing them and their problem.
Right. Any specific steps? I mean, like, what's the first step? I mean, that we always talk about recovery and all these things. There's always a first step. What would be the first step?
Gotcha. Well, whether you seek help that is professional or non-professional, one of the things about when we love someone struggling with alcohol or drugs, and maybe we start to identify with being a people pleaser or lacking a know with them, is we're not going to accomplish overcoming that barrier with just reading books, just listening to podcasts, just looking at Facebook groups. We need another human support who is either a professional or who has come before us on this journey to be a mentor, because we need, back to the human connection again, Jeff, we need another human involved to do the kind of growth that happens with the codependency related to someone in your life struggling with alcohol or drugs. Now, why? Can I take the next question? Why, Jeff?
Yeah, jump on it.
I'd love it. Why? The chaos and the energy created from the addiction of the other person requires that mother or spouse, sister, brother, to come up with more energy to overcome it than the energy of the addiction.
It's a net loss. It's a net loss.
I mean, you've lived it. That addiction brings a lot of energy to the table. Would you agree?
Oh man, it's soul sucking. I mean, it just takes everything out of you. Then you don't have time for your other kids and your business and your own health, because I used to tell my son all the time, I'm just a fire chief to you. All I do is every call I get, I'm putting out a fire. Now, I loved him immensely, but I felt that I was being put in this position. So you're right. It's anyone watching this, you included, Jake, that have a loved one that demands this attention. There's a fine line between enabling and unconditional love, I guess I'll say. And I lived it. And, 2 people lost their life on my watch. And I can either let that take my life, or I could say, hey, what can I get out of this through conversations like with Jake that I can take to other people, that they don't have to, I've never done cocaine. You have, but you haven't lost a child. I have. True. So, but you and I together, we have a story that together we can help a lot of people. And just imagine if you and I could get together with hundreds of thousands of people and share our stories, which is what I want to do next summer. That's my whole objective next summer, is to get people like you and I out there to continue these stories. So the next Jake coming up who's 14, or the next Jeff that, is 45, that hasn't had all this happen yet, that when it does happen, it's not the end of their life. You and I are still here. You're a guest on my podcast. So somehow we survived.
The legacy will live. Well, hey, here's the deal. In so many ways, we cannot change the wind, but we can definitely adjust our sails. And I feel like that's what people like you and I are living into. When it comes to the individual family, it is a miraculous act for someone who loves someone with an addiction to learn to stop breathing for them, to learn to breathe for themselves in a way that allows the person with the addiction to also start breathing for themselves. And I mean, I listened to myself a few minutes ago. I got a hell of a story when it comes to my youth story, right? But I'm getting to the point where I think I have a bigger story when it comes to my excitement for the solution. And by the way, I am not partial to any way of recovery. I am partial to what is the goal and what can we come up with that will work for this individual to get there. And that's a key component of navigation too, individualized.
100%. And I see that, with polo and stuff, you're into horses, obviously. Is that a correct statement?
That's very correct. Actually, the path to which I found this latest evolution of my journey with this program that has carried the Emerge word or the Emerge brand for the last 4 years started with horses.
I want to hear more about this. Because that was something I saw a lot of your posts and stuff. How do horses help with recovery and therapy and all that? I know I've seen plenty of programs where, autistic children or people that need, that comfort of an animal, but someone going through recovery, is it the same concept?
The horse is the same concept. The work to specifically reach someone in recovery, I would say quite different. The container I'm interested in is quite transformational. Yes, the horses can be soothing to pet them. Yes, their hearts produce an electromagnetic wave frequency that has a 15-foot radius. So whatever they're putting down, you're picking up in that frequency. So yes, there are soothing aspects to being around them. No doubt it might benefit you to lower your stress and not have that next drink. What I'm talking about is the transformational opportunity with them. At the end of the day, where I'm really excited to take people is on a path of massive awakening. Often that starts when that person who does struggle with substances, here's at least how I describe it. When he figures out what that lizard is that's keeping him drunk or high, and he does it on the back of the horse in the experiences that we have, and you see, or I get to see, the look on his face that he just coughed up that lizard he couldn't find for the life of him in a place like group therapy. I'm all for group therapy, by the way, but he wasn't finding it there. On the back of the horse, relating, he found it, and he can begin his path to freedom. Well, so great, he's accessed it, but now he needs some awareness. Horses are incredible mirrors, because remember, so we're pack animals, we're predators. You notice your eyes and my eyes are in the front of our head. Look at a horse or a deer or a cow, the eyes are in the side. That's a prey animal. Okay, so the prey animal has evolved to be programmed to stay alive, which I could get on another tangent of what a miracle it is that an animal that is convinced you might eat it at any moment lets you on its back. Can you see the parallels for somebody who struggled with drugs to get in a relationship like that?
The trust there is immense. For sure.
And the awareness, because for me too, awareness has not always been a strength. And I'll leave it to the jury how it's going today. The awareness that the horses give people about their true self, that's the hallmark of working with people in recovery and horses.
So where is this mental health industry going? I mean, it seems to me, if you look again, I repeat this pretty much every theme, but there's 14,000 treatment centers. So do we make it 14,001? Do we make it 14,002? Do we just make them bigger and nicer? And there's 3.5 million people in recovery. It's like a $60 billion business. So is that the next evolution? Is just more facilities or, and I propose, or I submit to people to ponder, is the next evolution breaking through and trying alternative ways? And you're in an area where that would probably be a little bit, you have a niche there with using the horses, and especially with the mothers and stuff. It's definitely something that you roll to and you feel comfortable in. An area that I've been just recently kind of interested in actually finding a guest on my podcast is in the psychedelic space, which really goes counter to maybe a dad that lost a son to drugs ought to be more criminal, more laws. go after the drug cartels, go after big pharma.
Punitive stuff.
I'm not that way. I'm not a vengeful person. That stuff didn't kill Seth. Seth's decision to do heroin killed Seth.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to change the supply side of anything. So going back to my question, I guess with psychedelics, which piqued my interest, is there seems to be a lot of people I'm seeing on LinkedIn and social media that are just kind of sprinkling in this concept. Now, I've never tried a psychedelic, and full disclosure, it's not on my bucket list. Yet, that doesn't mean I can't be open to understanding. What originally attracted me, Jake, was I was on the Alzheimer's board here in Cedar Rapids, and I came across some research that psychedelics, there is some early or maybe some, repressed evidence back in the 80s and 90s with Alzheimer's, end-of-life therapy, where psychedelics have really been beneficial to help people either with cognitive impairments or memory, and when they're dying, instead of just giving them morphine, giving them fentanyl, just numb the pain before they cross over to wherever they go. Psychedelics seem to be there. So now I'm reading literature on psychedelics for ADD, psychedelics for mental health, psychedelics for alcoholism. And all of a sudden my radar went up like, okay, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe this is the next landscape of mental health therapy. What's your thoughts on that?
Wow, that's a lot. Let me take a whack, and then if you have a follow-up, feel free to come back, okay? My first thought is I have a responsibility to practice within the scope of my practice, and I have that ethical responsibility to the people I help. And I've also stated that I believe in individualized recovery, no one size fits all, and let's get you something that works. So what do I do with that? Well, I'm trained as a scientist in the animal sciences, and so I do follow the sciences. And if you think that that's possibly a route that would be supportive to you, then I can absolutely be supportive of routing you or navigating you to someone who is thought to be a leading provider in that field. And I could definitely support you in evaluating if you think that's helpful for you. I know people who swear it has helped them significantly, Jeff. And at the same time, I also feel we are in a period of massive change in that whole space. And I personally am in the camp of wait and see. There's some exciting elements happening in Oregon, not just in the psychedelics, but also the decriminalization.
Yeah, I agree with that. I 100% agree with that.
Here in Idaho, the position actually, we're one of the few states to not have even medical marijuana. The position is that we're surrounded by states that are trying this experiment. And so between the decriminalization in Oregon and the overall availability of medical marijuana in the surrounding states, the Idaho position is wait and see. And my own tendency, given my background in the sciences, is to let the data inform this process with open-mindedness.
Right. I look at this too as, what does this show the kids? I guess if we start taking psychedelics to do whatever, it almost opens the door that that's okay for kids to start exploring. And remember, kids do things differently than adults. I mean, I'm at the stage of my life where I'm not really escaping anything. Mine would be exploration. Mine would be going to another realm of spirituality or consciousness or something where I could keep evolving as a species, as a human, I've got this quote that I use a lot, you're green. If you're green, you grow. If you're ripe, you rot. And so if you always stay learning, whether it's things that you agree with or not, just keep learning, then you evolve. But if you feel like, well, I know this, then you start rotting and you start dying. And for me, at 55 years old with enough death in my life, I have to stay green. I have to stay open-minded. That's why, politically, I'm homeless. I don't have a home politically. I don't even watch any TV. It doesn't interest me to have people yelling at each other, trying to convince me how to think when I don't really want to think about those things. I want I want more peace in my life and less happiness. And watching TV doesn't make me happy, so I don't watch it. And so I talk a lot about that, the frame of mind that we try to get as we get older. And I think learning is so important, Jake, and not shutting doors and keep breaking down barriers, And as a scientist, now I'm not trained like you, but philosophically, I'm a skeptic. I'm a scientist. I like to see the evidence, yet I have faith. I have faith in processes. I have faith in humanity. I have faith in people overall are good. Mm-hmm. And I'm proven wrong daily, but I don't lose that faith. I had faith that Adderall would help my son. It didn't. But I had faith when a doctor said take Adderall that he knew more than I did.
We're back on the consequences topic.
So faith can lead you down a dangerous path if you're too faithful. So I want faith, but I want to, like Reagan said, trust but verify. I want faith but verify.
I got it. It sounds like
we follow me.
We might be pretty close on this one. Yeah, we, especially with social these days, a good meme to an uninformed person. I mean, that's better than hard science to some people. And that's just another reason for the relevance of advocates, professionals, navigators, people to say, oh, wait, hold on. Could we have a conversation about that? Mm-hmm. Could we pull up some overall information? Could we look into the source of that information? Oh, well, the information you're getting is from your friend, and he's in the 6th grade, and this is what he has learned from his parents' behavior. Because you were on this, I really wanted to stop there, Jeff, but we kept going. I mean, these kids, they're not learning from what the parents say. They're learning from what the parents do.
100%.
And the fact of the matter, when it comes to substances in our society today, is, my view at least, if we're attacking it from the supply side, we're wasting tons of money and energy.
I agree.
But if we go at it from the demand side, we have a lot of hope.
Yeah, and there's a lot more room on the demand side because everything's on the supply side. Everything's going after treatment facilities and recovery and rehab and drug, the drug laws and big pharma, and everyone's going after that. And I just figure my voice is more heard or more impactful if it's heard on the demand side. And so I want to work with the kids. I want to work with the parents in talking with the kids and teaching the parents, hey, you know what? You may want to blame this on your kids. This is really a you problem. And I have to confess, when my son was going through his alcoholism, his addiction, his incarcerations, my wife and I were still drinking. We were drinking a bottle or two of wine every night. And I didn't have the courage, as a dad, as a man, as a father, I didn't have the courage to say, Seth, I'm going to support you by supporting myself first, quitting. I have to take that to my grave, but I don't haunt myself with it. I take it to my grave. I take it to my grave with a responsibility, not a burden. You know what I mean?
At the end of the day, my invitation for everyone to consider in being gentle on themselves is like, are you doing the most you can with what you have? Mm-hmm. And I mean, in the beginning, I talked about the mayhem and destruction of my family history and the poverty, but generation to generation, there's a consistent pattern of people doing better and doing the most they can with what they have. And if I look at people from that standpoint, I can feel pretty hopeful.
So what's next for you? I mean, do you have a book out?
I don't. I need an author. So maybe this could also be a request for a great ghostwriter. What's next for me? So the next evolution of Emerge will be the Emerge Center for Addiction Recovery. And one of my goals, thank you, is a big goal for me is to have some geographic flexibility. And so while the horses and the transformational work I offer will certainly be available, a lot of the mainstay work I'm doing is going virtual. The last couple of years have really opened that up for me. I'm excited to have my flexibility because that's what's best for me. And I'm excited to reach more people in more places thoroughly, effectively, often 3 to 6 months before a mother's son or daughter is ready to go to treatment, there is a really important conversation we should start having. That's all going live next week. We are 1 week from
Awesome.
launching the platform. Wicked excited about that. So we're recording here today, Jeff, on September 8th, and that'll go out on September 15th. I have an exciting invitation today. Thanks for your willingness to let me make it. We will be posting in the comments of this podcast a link where anyone, and especially a mother who's concerned about their son or daughter's drinking, can take our free Get Sober and Stay Sober assessment. And that's pretty compelling to me to have the Stay Sober part come up here at the tail end of our interview, Jeff, because we know a lot of people that put their kids through so many treatment centers. The Get Sober part for some happens ad nauseum, and part of what's so important in this evolution is we gotta crack the nut on the Stay Sober part for those people that's their goal.
Yeah, that's so well said, because it's so many metaphors you could come up with, or analogies. Losing weight's easy, keeping it off's not. There's all these things. Lowering your cholesterol is fairly easy, but keeping it low is not. Because we revert back to norms and codependency and things like that get us back into trouble. But I think sobriety itself is a very interesting word, because for me personally, I don't use the word. And I'll tell you why, Jake, because it implies a struggle. Mm-hmm. And I'm not in a struggle. And so I don't use the word. I never tell people I'm sober. I just, what I tell people? I choose at 3:13 on Wednesday, September 8, 2021, as I'm speaking with Jake LeClair, not to drink alcohol. Mm-hmm. That's what I tell myself. So I don't play the social narratives of the norms that most people play. I don't use the word alcoholic or sober or recovery or anything. I just choose at this moment not to drink. Now, I may choose tomorrow to drink, but I'm not there tomorrow. I'm not there yet. I could die tonight. So why spend a lot of time? And I don't look backwards. I can't tell me how many days I've been sober. I just contradict myself. I can't tell you how many days I haven't had a drink. I can tell you the day I quit, but I don't keep score. Mm-hmm. I don't keep score because for me, let me role play this with you. If I decide to drink today, okay, I wouldn't torture myself that I ruined some streak. And I know they don't teach you this in AA. They want you to keep a streak because that holds you accountable.
It works for them.
To me, I don't play that. I have a bottle of wine next to my bed. I have a 2016 bottle of Camus, which is the name of my dog.
Okay.
To remind me that I have this conquered. Now, that goes against everything that everybody will tell you, but like everyone tells me, but Jeff, it works for you. It works for you. So I tell people out there, find your why and you'll find a way. You'll find a way. Most people, Jake, just haven't found their why. For me, it took the death of 2 people. That was my why, but not everybody's going to have something like that happen. Maybe a why is you got fired from your job. Maybe you got divorced. Maybe you got bankrupt. Maybe you got a drunk driving and injured somebody. There's a million whys. You have found a why and you have found a way. So have I. We're just 2 people. I think our stories in conjunction with our unique situations, I think we can help a lot of people, man. I really do. I really think there's a lot of people really struggling. If that wasn't a true statement, then why is every statistic going through the roof? When my son died, there was 56,000 overdoses. Last year was 95. So, you're talking less than 5 years, man. That's an 80% increase. What's out there isn't working. Mm-hmm. It ain't working. It ain't working. We need new approaches. We need new narratives. We need to break the stigma. We need to stop using the same terms we've been using and we need to just look at things from a different perspective. And I'm honored to have you on the show. I've really just met you, but I think with when this podcast posts, your launch will already be out there. So you and I will have connected many times. I want to promote what you're doing on my website. I want to meet you on the tour. I'd love to have an opportunity to meet all my influencers on social media. And at the end of the day, if one person watches this podcast and says, today's the day I'm just tired of being tired.
Mm-hmm.
Something Jake said, I'm never going to drink again, or I'm not going to drink today. Like
They're
Jeff
going to set
said,
their goal and they're going to live into it, whatever that goal may be.
Then you and I are making a difference.
That's so key.
And I have to keep reminding myself, I'm not on this journey to save everyone, especially if it's at my demise. That's the very cautious dance we're all in, is that you want to help people, Jake, but we don't want to do it at your demise. Right. Yeah. And it's easy to do. Vulnerability can be a problem if you don't manage it.
I'm very proud of you to hear you talking about doing what's best for you. And what's best for me is to have a rich, deep, transformational impact. My purpose will have been fulfilled not by how many, but how deep. Gotta tell you, Jeff, I took a look at the tour. It's quite a schedule, man. I did catch the routes. I was picturing all the zigs and zags. Really excited for you. I think it will be incredibly deep. I'm excited to see you on the road, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be on with you today.
It's 92 days, but I ain't ever coming back, brother.
I love it.
I'm never coming back. I told my boys, it's I can look at being widowed and all this as this convenient excuse for me to ruin my life and those around me, or I can look at this as it's freed up the world for me to go out and, in being vulnerable and sharing my story. People like Jake are going to say, well, maybe I'm going to talk about what happened to me when I was 10, or maybe I'm going to talk about my cocaine addiction. And like I said, I walk away out of every conversation a better person, and I can add you to the list of those experiences. So how do people reach you, Jake?
Yeah, the website, I'd love to share some information. Website is www.emergeresilient.com. That'll be in the comments.
Resilient with a T.
With a T.
Yep.
I could be emailed at jake@emergeresilient.com. The link to the assessment will then lead you to more great content, and look forward to connecting. I offer a no-fee recovery activation call. It's my dream to get this no-fee recovery activation navigation focus call broadly available. I hope that eventually the calls overwhelm us, and we need a plan to figure out how to handle the calls. Because what we do in our recovery activation calls, Jeff, is we take a chance to get really clear on an individualized basis about exactly what's holding somebody back. Because see, what I've come across is that my model, my business provides extra for my family. I don't have a bed to fill tonight. I don't have an investor to pay for, and therefore I have an opportunity to do this work in a way that can be so oriented toward what's right, both for me and the people we serve. And so I came across that insight recently, that by doing this model from a place, from a business model, that it will be depended on only for what's extra. I guess that means it won't be depended on. That changed everything about how and why we're doing this. And most importantly, for folks who choose to access more of our services, we can make it all about what's best for them.
Well, don't hope, just do.
Let's do.
Hey, listen, brother, appreciate being on the show. It's been an honor, and I know you and I are going to stay well connected in the future. And with that, I end every episode with thank you. And as always, live undeterred.